To talk about Terry Addington in a group like this. I mean, I've known Terry since I first met him when he was a member of this other trade association called CTIA, and I actually went there and worked for a lot of years. And so Terry and I have been friends and gone through a lot of wars together, and I was so delighted that he said yes, that he would be the moderator today. So Terry Addington, he's the president and CEO of SI Wireless, and does business as MobileNation. And I knew him when he was doing a little Southern Illinois company. And we are so glad that he came back to the wireless world. And he's going to help us through some of these difficult issues today. And so let me turn it over to Terry Addington and his team, and he'll introduce. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve.
Great seeing you.
Let me just go down the line here. Why don't you just take 10, 15 seconds to tell everybody who you are, who you work with, what your role is at your company, and then we'll get into the program.
My name is Steve Barker. I work at Brightstar. I'm responsible for the distribution services that we're providing to a number of customers, but specifically Sprint.
You said 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, go.
I'm Brad Blanken. I work at the CCA and the Industry Development Group. Thank you.
Aaron Gillespie with Nex-Tech Wireless, Director of Operations.
Nathan Robson, nTelos Wireless, Marketing.
Brian Sullivan, responsibility for product engineering and development for Sprint.
And I believe Sprint's the sponsor for this luncheon.
Correct.
So we want to thank Sprint for their sponsorship and great lunch. Thank you. Let me set the stage briefly for why we're here. We've got a variety of initiatives that are going on that I think are a direct result of a true visionary that addressed our show last year. Those of you that were here last year, you probably remember Sprint Chairman, SoftBank Chairman, CEO, Maheshwari-san deliver a visionary statement about partnering and about the need to work together and develop a partnered approach to really compete against what has become, in my mind anyway, the embedded duopoly of AT&T and Verizon. I chaired a panel last year, and I was very enthusiastic about the program. But there's always a little bit of doubt in whether or not a larger carrier like Sprint versus a small carrier like me will follow through. And because of the hard work of a lot of people, the people that are up here on the dais and plus a variety of other folks, we've got things that are happening and are real, are tangible, and should and will bring value to all small carriers, but then the broader ecosystem as we look to develop this competitive partnership to compete against the large two carriers. We've got initiatives from Sprint on partnering to build rural coverage, of which my company has benefited. Great relationship, and I believe they're still looking for more rural partners. We've got a roaming hub that has, in the process of coming up live, that's been developed, that is exciting, and hopefully will bring a larger one footprint that engulfs everybody that joins in building a footprint equivalent to, or at least competitive with the larger carriers. And then finally, we're going to talk most of today about the device hub. And that concept, again, is being driven in order to provide access to devices, near-time access to the top-end devices, access to a broader portfolio of devices, and devices that cover a broader range of spectrum. And let me tell you, about 12 or 13 years ago, I participated. I was actually asked to lead the small carrier group in developing a GSM coalition. And it went very well. It was a roaming coalition with the lead carrier of Singular. The Singular CEO, Stan Sigmund, put his stamp of approval on it. He's the one who wanted to do it. The second they got to handsets, they had promised access to handsets. It took about 2 months of looking at the difficulty, the expense, and the nightmare of trying to bring a broad handset assortment to a coalition of different diverse carriers. it stopped, it died. And I think what's happening here is that we have partners that are so committed, that are so involved in putting resources, in putting time and money towards getting this done, that this is actually coming to life. It is actually happening. So it's very, very exciting. So I want to congratulate and thank all the stakeholders that have put so much work into doing this. Thank you for your time, effort, and investment. And we'll talk a little bit about that during the course of this panel. So let me start off. I'm going to start off with a scripted question. We'll kind of go down the line here, and then we'll kind of follow the flow of wherever it takes us. I hope to have a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience, if we can get there. So let me ask this. What steps were taken by each of you, each of the stakeholders on the podium, to move Moss's vision into a viable and detailed action plan that benefits both the broad competitive landscape and your own position within that landscape? So I'll start with you.
All right, well, from Brightstar's perspective, I think the journey for us in this opportunity started probably the day after Moss said what he said. And it was kind of connected with our relationship with Sprint, where we support several other distribution opportunities. And one of them that's going to be very similar to what the CCA opportunity will be is the MVNO distribution work that Sprint conducts on behalf of their MVNO partners. So Brightstar was working with Sprint on standing that up, and we stood that up and commercialized that last year, mid-year. And so the reason I bring in and start there is that foundation and that platform is very similar to the integration into the device hub that we're going to be using to leverage how we'll bring the devices to the CCA members. And so it started a little bit, about a year ago. And then when we really started socializing about the nuances of CCA, we started looking at not only the technical integration, which there's a significant integration to get the device management part where Brightstar fits in correct. So that's 99% done. We're almost complete with UAT today, so we're excited to be right about at the end zone. And then we've got the other layer that was probably underestimated was developing the relationship with Sprint to provide what we feel is a compelling business model to the CCA operators, as well as provide a value-based solution, a platform for growth as we move forward in the device space. So that's kind of our involvement and our vision in how we've been working to get this going.
Brent?
Well, I think from the CCA's perspective, it's been an interesting course of action. We started looking at this, I think, well in advance of Moss's speech last year, having been involved with the conversations leading up to that speech, but also predating my time even at the association. I've just crossed the 3-year mark here at CCA, but I really tip my hat to my boss for his vision around helping the operators, not just on the advocacy piece, because I think most of everybody looks at the association primarily, as they should, as an advocacy organization, but there certainly is ways that we can work together on the business side to complement those efforts. And so that's really where I focus my efforts. And to that end, we've been working on device acquisition or ways that we can help the operators get access to devices from the time that I came about. I think the program, as it's coming to market today, is really the byproduct of a ton of effort that, like Steve mentioned, there's a ton of distribution challenges. There's a ton of OEM issues, and working through all the players and trying to understand the roles and who's doing what and coordinating the different efforts has been quite an interesting challenge. So what we've tried to do is look at ways where we add value, and then definitely step out of the way where we don't. Because a lot of times, you can unnecessarily inject yourself into a place where you don't need to be. And so the handset model, as it's currently, the margins are thin, the expenses are high. So the idea around this program is to, really comes down to 3 core tenets. It's just simply getting access to devices at the same time as the tier 1 operators, at the same cost, and with as broad a portfolio as possible. And so if you focus on those 3 main issues, and you maintain that focus, I think you do everything not to mess that up. And so that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, from Nex-Tech Wireless's perspective, we are in a very unique position because we've had a long-standing relationship with Sprint from an intercarrier services perspective. We were part of their traditional SRA program. So we're really in a unique position because we had the opportunity to participate not only as a lead carrier with the CCA roaming hub, but also with the CCA device hub. And some of our thoughts into that is we obviously have customers to serve that demand nationwide LTE. So it was a natural fit for us to be a part of the roaming hub due to Sprint's involvement with that and their coast-to-coast LTE. But more importantly, on the device side of things, that was a pretty specific challenge because we've all done roaming. We had never done quite anything like what the device hub was positioning. So we took it as an opportunity to continue to move the ball forward with our relationship with Sprint and the CCA. And like Brad had indicated, we see this as an opportunity to really have a fruitful, iconic roadmap for us long term, not just in 2015, but it's for 2016 and beyond. And not only is it about the iconics that you have that are available to you, it's also, like he said, it's the timing of which you get to launch that device, and there's a cost component in there that I think will become attractive for us long term. And then I believe there's visions of the device hub to maybe even move outside of the smartphone umbrella and maybe even move back down into potentially tablets, potentially MiFi hotspots, and that becomes extremely attractive for a small carrier who doesn't have the buying power that someone like Sprint does at the tier 1 level.
Nathan?
Yeah, sure. From nTelos's perspective, looking at how we got to this point, it's highly iterative. You had two dynamics. You had the internal dynamics of working through systems that have been developed for a certain provisioning structure and warehouse structure and distribution structure. So you had all the dynamics of evaluating what dynamics that would bring to the organization. And then you had the dynamic of multiple organizations from Sprint, from CCA, Brightstar, kind of across all the various carriers and figuring out how all of those elements will work together. So it's been highly exploratory, highly iterative, right? We'll get to a point, think we're there, step back a little bit, make some more progress, step back, make a fair amount, make a trip to Kansas City, make more progress. So now there's some nice momentum that the action plans and detailed plans that you referred to have become far more detailed action plans, business plans. Really, and Steve mentioned it. Right at the goal line, it has that feel that the momentum's strong and ready to get some devices on the show.
Yeah, so like Brad, Sprint's engagement with this initiative really does predate Moss's speech last year, although that certainly kicked it into high gear.
It was kind of it was the momentum
that was
builder.
the formal kickoff, but we were certainly preparing for it before. We had conversations with the CCA before, and from a roaming perspective, I think the benefits there are pretty readily known. They're pretty self-explanatory. The ability for all of us to be able to expand our roadmaps to suit our business needs and partner together on a set of standards to be able to allow that interoperability was key. And so that was kind of the path of least resistance to get up, and I think that's going very well. That's kind of an accelerated path to delivery. And that was one where there were a lot of independent agreements already in place. And now that we're moving into a world where LTE exists, LTE roaming was just the next natural step. On the device hub side, what Sprint's contributed to that and what we've actually done is it's really all the prep work that comes with building out something like a device hub. And it's not really light lifting. It involves everything down to the core specifications for the device. because there are implications for hardware, software, and then systems outside of the device. So what we've spent the last, say, 18 months really looking at is how do we take a terminal, a device that's spec'd for operation on Sprint as the primary network, and make it ubiquitous enough that we have the flexibility that we can actually pass that device along to our partners. And it really started with network support. So before we did any of this, and before Masa gave his speech, we had already published new specifications to our manufacturer community to let them know that we needed to scope in additional spectrum in our devices. And that would have been whether the device hub came along or not. We were looking at that for future proofing our devices for roaming agreements that may come. LTE roaming was something on the horizon. So we were doing that anyway, but it was a nice natural fit into the program, because now it meant that we could incorporate some of our additional bands, some of the additional spectrum on LTE, and make these devices more readily available out of the box to operate on other carrier networks, CCA member carrier networks included. So that's where it started. As we get into hub development, once you have a base device that can operate on multiple networks, then the hub development comes into a systems development issue. It becomes a software development issue, and then it really becomes an account management issue as well to be able to service that device through the hub. And that's where the partnership with those here on the panel and others really engaging the entire ecosystem has come into play. So whether it's the CCA lead carrier members that we've been partnering with here, whether it's Brightstar and standing up the ability to be able to fulfill and operate and pass devices through the hub, partnership with the OEMs, with the OS operators, really end-to-end, making sure that we're able to create a device that all carrier partners that join this hub can use, and they can not only use in a roaming way, but they can use as a device as though it were sourced for them, has really been where we've been focusing. I will say that it's been anything but a smooth ride, but we didn't expect it to be. It's a fairly complex thing, and there have been a lot of trial and tribulations, as has been mentioned. But through those trials, we've had a lot of lessons learned over the last year, and I think we've now got a design that we've locked in with that I think will be very not only successful, but it will be scalable. And so we're really excited about where we're at right now. We think we've got a good path, and we're ready to get rolling.
Before I take us deeper into the value proposition, because I want to make sure that's very clear to everybody in the room, what the value proposition is today and what the value proposition will be, say, a year from today, if we're successful. But before I do that, let's... When we're successful. Did I say? Yeah, when we're successful. I think it'd be kind of interesting to everybody, because this is so complex. I mean, it is so hard. And I'll start back with you, Ryan. Was there any, like, one oh crap moment that just kind of blew you away, that this obstacle is insurmountable, that you finally fought through? Or were there a bunch of roadblocks and obstacles that you encountered? And if so, kind of describe the process of getting around them.
There wasn't one oh crap moment. There were multiple. But no, I think, again, we knew it was going to be somewhat complex. I think probably the biggest issue beyond hardware compatibility, because that's probably the easiest of all, although that takes the longest lead time. I think it's really understanding how you touch the mobile core for each of the carrier members, and how I take a device that's built for Sprint, built to provision and activate on Sprint, and then make it so that it can be provisioned and activated on another carrier network, and not as a roaming device, because as we all know, when you're roaming on somebody's network, the service level expectation is way lower than whenever you're running on that network as a home network. There's a certain service expectation that the carrier member that you're in contract with is able to touch that device, support it, manage it, and that's where the complexity really lies. So building a device that can operate really as a home network device across multiple networks is where the complexity really lies. And it comes down to provisioning and activation. And so we have a unique method to us. Most carriers do. And so figuring out how we build the bridge from that for a device that's built with our OMA client embedded, that touches our OMA servers and really isn't meant to touch anyone else's, that's where most of the trials and tribulations and the oh crap moments have come in. What we found out, though, surprisingly, as we got into testing, is we expected more problems than we've actually encountered. And as a result, for those that have been directly involved, and I'll speak in generic terms, we've actually been able to loosen the reins a little bit on how much control Sprint really has to have as part of that out-of-box process and as part of that activation. And we found a nice middle balance where we do some work on the device right up front to push some information to it, to prep it for operation and activation on another carrier network, but then we basically hand it off at that point and allow the carriers the flexibility to be able to activate and provision the device the way they do today. So that has huge benefits for us, and I would actually say that's been a revelation that we've just encountered over the last few weeks, and our testing up till now has netted that out. But yeah, I mean, we're not through testing yet, so there's no doubt that we'll probably run into a few more bumps along the road.
Sure. Yeah.
But the good news is we've got enough dedication from everybody. We've got everybody committed to getting there. I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. We do see a path through
Safe
this.
to say you've worked through the tougher issues.
I believe
probably, at
so.
this point.
I believe so. Now, we're getting into end-to-end functional testing, so you don't know what you don't know. But I would say we've been able to work this from end to end for the majority of the operation, and we're far enough along that we're feeling comfortable that we have a path.
Outstanding. Now, Nathan and Aaron, you guys paved the way for us small carriers, and we appreciate that. You know, years ago when I ran another company, you know, we always kind of volunteered for that role. You know, we purposely didn't and don't volunteer these days because, you know, we're a new entrant to the market. You guys have been around a while. You've got a lot under your belt. You volunteered. You're kind of the test beds, if you will. I'll start with Nathan. I mean, as you work through this process with them, any aha moments, gotcha moments? How did you kind of develop the comfort level and get to where you're at today?
Yeah, similarly, and there were multiple. I'm not a technical guy, but I know enough to, when technical people start to freak out myself.
Yeah.
And there were several of those moments where we just kind of, you know, I'd look at Mary Alice Bomar and say, how bad is this? And, oh, it's bad. This is really bad. But the flexibility on the Sprint side was absolutely there all along in terms of coming up with a solution, always working through it. There wasn't a delay. There wasn't kind of that typical big company delay. I mean, they were absolutely dedicated to resolving the issue and looking for a solution that was amicable for all. So it was, yeah, multiple moments, but all very positively dealt with. Across the board, whether it be technical, financial, however. It was good.
Anything you want to add to that, Aaron?
Yeah, I think all those points are extremely valid. I think one important piece that we experienced was when we got to our first technical challenge. You know, that's kind of a good test to see how committed everybody is, and it was refreshing to see not only from Sprints but all the C-Spires and the nTelos and our team as well, that there's a lot of commitment, that people weren't going to let these technical challenges really slow the program down. And I think today we can really look back and say that we've accomplished a lot. Still things to accomplish. As Ryan said, we don't know what we don't know, but the commitment is there, which is reassuring.
Well, and we did find out that there are things that we don't know that we don't know.
Yeah.
Brad informed us of that in a meeting, and that's like, what was that, 80% of the?
I don't know if it was 80 or 98% or something like that, but I drew a circle at one of our meetings where I was showing about, you know, the things you know and the things that you know you don't know, and then everything else is the stuff you know you don't know, and that's been the exercise of our initiative is, you know, learning, you know, because this has never been done, right? You know, it's one thing to think about when we started this project, you said, hey, we're just going to get Sprint devices. So great, just give me the device and we'll take it and that'll be great. And that was kind of the high level thought process around getting devices. And then lo and behold, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So, you know, all the points that they made and the resources, and, you know, it's one thing for a few of us to be sitting up here, but I can look out in the crowd and see the few other folks here, but there's hundreds and hundreds of people who have spent thousands and thousands of hours working on this. And, you know, like Ryan said, and Aaron and Nathan, that, you know, these issues have popped up, and the reason why they haven't been showstoppers is because they've been taken care of. Because the mission has been clear and the focus has been consistent, and they've decided that this is something they're going to take care of, and that's why, because they've maintained that mission, it hasn't deviated and said, oh, it's not that important anymore. We're going to focus on something else. We'll get back to you later. These issues are serious. They've just gotten taken care of because people care, and it means something to get this thing done. So it's been really
Just a quick public shout out for Brad. People don't know this, but he's a one-man shop essentially at CCA.
I'm not. I have Kim and I are there too. So.
One or two man shop. Yeah. So, but I mean, he has kind of driven the process from its vision down. Of course, Steve Barry's always been supportive of this, but it's been a ton of work, and to get this far, to get this close, it's just really exciting. So, Steve, let me ask you: any gotcha moments as you guys have tried to integrate in?
I think that when I look at it from a technical standpoint, I've never had any concern. I know we have a strong couple with Sprint, and we had done some of this with the initial platform. So I've always felt really comfortable and confident that that would come together. The two biggest concerns that I had, and I think we're through one of them, and I think, with the people in the room today, I think we're starting the bridge to the next issue. And I think it revolves around, as the model around a pricing for handsets. There's a lot of energy in that discussion, and there was maybe some initial discussions that framed how that would roll out to the members that they were more budgetary in nature than fact-based, and I think that probably put a cloud over where we were trying to get to. And when you start looking at the device cost and then your potential distribution or replenishment partner, that's a partner that you've selected, you've worked with over years. It's a trusted partner in your ecosystem, your supply chain, and to knife switch something like that, I think there was a lot of work early on with Sprint to make sure that we were cognizant of the model that a lot of the CDMA members enjoy today with another partner, and trying to set something up that would be competitive and then eventually better. And so making sure that they felt that, and I think we've done that, and I'm excited to hear the feedback as we go forth and start selling beyond the initial 3 operators. But to the extent that there's also probably a level of trust that you got to earn in that supply chain, I think we've got that at Sprint, and I think we've got that with the core 3 partners. I think that getting and earning that is our next challenge, and I expect that. We've been selling supply chain solutions for a long time, and that's a natural response. So I think it's just something that you put your head down, you work through the issues, and you get going on it. But I think that's probably on the heads of a lot of the supply chain people in the audience today about, how's this going to work? Once I get the pricing right, how does that work for me, and what does that fit into my solution? I think that's the next layer of complexity that we have to address and solve.
Okay. I know one question, as I've talked to my peers, and we all talk amongst each other. It's one of the beauties about the small carrier community. We all have kind of ongoing dialogue. One of the concerns, and I'll be real upfront, address it towards Ryan, is I alluded to my Singular experience back in the early 2000s, and honestly, that was a politically driven partnership. Singular was merging with AT&T. Singular wanted to go to the FCC and claim that they had embraced rural carriers, and it was more politically driven. It wasn't driven from a commercial need as much as it was to be able to say, I've done this and I support these guys, and oh, by the way, please approve the merger. I mean, that was clear. And of course, the coalition ended up dying a slow death. Your commitment is obviously there as Sprint. I mean, you've shown commitment with your roaming, your footprint expansion through what was the old strategic roaming group. You got the roaming hub now, the device hub. But there's genuine concern that 2 years down the road, big carriers have a tendency to go this way, stop, go this way, and is the commitment long term, and how can we be sure and know that commitment is there long term?
Well, the one thing I'll say is I think it's been, I hope at least for the ecosystem that we've been working with on this for the last year plus, I hope it's clear now that Sprint's motivations are not political with this, right? I mean, we stand to gain as much as I think everybody here in the room does from this relationship. And on the roaming side, it's expansion of footprint. On the device side, it's It's creating a baseline for ubiquity and interoperability going forward, which I think will be critical in our industry. I think everybody thought there's been a couple of frontiers on device technology where everybody's like, we're all so different, but if we can just get to this point, we'll all be the same. And I think LTE, several years ago, 6-8 years ago, was one of those things. And I think now those of us that have implemented LTE or in the process of implementing it have realized that it is far from that. It's the exact opposite, because no LTE is the same. And so as a result, there is a need for us to always be looking at how we interoperate, not only with our partners, but with our competitors. And so this is a great bridge for us to do that. We've got a great base with multiple different network complexities, multiple different technologies and experience that we're looking at within this network that is CCA, where we can share learnings, where we can work towards common standards, and where we can build a common baseline, and so that our customers benefit from that, so that no matter where they go, they know what to expect from the devices that they're carrying. I think Masa, in his speech a year ago, I think he actually, not to quote him, but I think he actually said we've got to look out for the new duopoly that is Verizon and AT&T. And Sprint, like it or not, Sprint is a challenger to those two. And that's not something that's going to change overnight. It's been that way for a long time, and probably will be for some time to come. So we need partnerships like this to be able to compete, to be able to expand our footprint, and to be able to match service with some of our larger, from a network perspective, larger mobile network operators in the U.S.
2 events occurred that made me feel more comfortable. It was obviously public knowledge that SoftBank was looking to acquire another sizable carrier. That fell through. That, if history repeated itself, there was an opportunity there for Sprint's commitment to wane.
Sure.
The second thing was typically when a new CEO is introduced to the company, a lot of times they go off on their own direction. But the fact that Sprint's held fast with the strategic partnerships and the direction through a switch to a new CEO, and that it's actually probably even stronger.
Right.
It led me to feel more comfort that this is a long-term relationship and not necessarily just a political relationship.
2 real quick affirmations on both of those. So the T-Mobile, Sprint T-Mobile talks were in full effect last year when Masa presented to this group, True. The one thing I'll tell you is we have added resources several fold since the time that we actually decided to abandon our acquisition bid for T-Mobile. So that's affirmation 1. And affirmation 2, new CEO Marcelo has come in. He came in August, and I believe he's actually going to be here tomorrow to address this same group.
Yes.
And he is, I'll tell you from speaking to him, and hopefully this will come through with you guys tomorrow, he's bullish on this as well, just like Masa is, and he shares his vision. So coming in, looking across the business at all the strategic initiatives that we have underway, this is certainly one that Marcelo has chosen to continue forward with. This is one that he believes in, and this is one that he's gonna make sure that we succeed in.
Steve, long-term commitment, Brightstar there?
Yeah,
for
no,
long haul?
Absolutely. I think that there's obviously we're both companies, Sprint and Brightstar, owned by the same company, SoftBank. So I think there's a definite couple from the structure and the organization. From the extent that this business is built on scale, I think that making the investment now, we're there. We've invested all the money in IT and the integration. We're in it for the long haul, and I think to the extent that we're leveraging our core business now, this fits in really nicely. And to the extent that we start building volume, I think there's better opportunity to aggregate some services that we've commercialized in other areas. So I look forward to the future as far as what we can do with this opportunity.
Now, on the phone when we talked, you talked to me about a pretty significant size investment in both financially and in resources. So, I mean, you've paid the price to get to this point, correct?
Correct. We've had about a $500,000 spend in IT just to integrate into the device hub, and that's predicated just to push the device out to the individual operator and get it in the right configuration. I think there's layers that are much smaller in comparison as we work with potential gains in forecasting and communication through the device hub in phase 2 out to the operators. I like that, but really there's some service creation environments that if we could get to, that's a little bit of where Brightstar's value creation wheelhouse is, and we look forward to those discussions. But kind of head down now just to get this thing out so we can earn that luxury to talk about future value adds.
Okay. Now, to the carrier members out there, I want to talk a little bit about the value proposition. A little bit deeper dive about the value proposition, because again, a year ago when this concept came up, talking to my peers, I think there was an expectation, unrealistic probably, that this was going to be all about price, and that's probably not fair, especially in the near term, because we're just talking about adding carriers beyond what we've got. I mean, we have a small cadre of initial members of this hub. But there's more to it, I understand. So let me start with Nathan, Aaron, and then let kind of Brad talk globally. Nathan, I mean, talk to me a little bit about the value proposition. How do you guys evaluating it? What are you seeing? Why are you committed to be this beta test carrier? And what do you see downstream as far as value to your company?
Yeah, we're in a little bit of a unique situation. We were, from a device perspective, within a pretty good time frame of hero device launches. So as Brad mentioned, the timing, pricing, and then breadth of product, that wasn't a major concern and didn't become a big part of our business planning. The second one, in terms of pricing, there is benefit there, both in kind of initial pricing, but then also in long-term price changes, things like that happen probably a little sooner than what we're accustomed to today. The third one's really where we saw the greatest benefit and where we built a majority of our business case around, and that's breadth of product. Certainly products that we've not had availability to from a quantity perspective and buying power perspective, we just not had the opportunity to get.
Is that mostly high-end product?
Well, no. It's some of it, certainly. But there's some niche product that a carrier in West Virginia and Virginia in terms of rugged devices or additional air cards and MiFis and tablets, certainly. Those four things, kind of Windows devices maybe long-term. I mean, some of those kinds of things really are what proved to be most attractive for us.
Good. Aaron?
Yeah, I would totally agree with what Nathan had to say, specifically the breadth of product. And we as small carriers don't have those high PO runs that the tier 2, tier 1s get to enjoy. So ensuring the iconics are in your roadmap, but more importantly, it's that I think there's a nice niche market coming down the pipe of these mid-range LTE Android devices that I think carriers are going to have to find ways to utilize that to take some of these cost of goods out of their business. So not so much pricing. We do like the attraction of launching the iconics more in line with the tier 1s. We're close today. Specifically, if you carry an Apple product, that kind of take that out. But there's the Samsung, the LGs. If you can get closer on that launching, you can leverage their national advertising. And as small carriers, we get to hear those pain points of why don't you have brand X, and maybe it's coming a month later, maybe it's coming 6 months later. Regardless, you always hate to commit to the customer because we all know how device testing can go. We all know how roadmaps can crumble, especially from the small regional perspective.
Good, okay. Brad, a little broader view maybe on the value proposition?
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, that every carrier is going to have their own interesting way to look at things. Each carrier values different aspects of their portfolio a little bit differently because their customer base may be interested in a rugged device or some modules or some things a little bit differently. So, when you look at it more holistically, you start to break down and see, what are the really key issues. So look at the device timing. If I can get you the device the same time the Iconics and you're leveraging that national ad spend, that's pretty interesting, right? Because I'm going to not have to have that customer come into my shop and say, wait, I can't get that, S whatever, Apple whatever, but I can get it down the street at the duopoly store. So there's an issue, even if it's only a month, that's 4 weeks of time that somebody else has got an opportunity to have at your customer. So timing's a huge issue. Price, whether you think it's an issue or not, we looked at this originally and we had this opinion. We thought, well, if we can get access to Sprint's pricing, we should be saving the carriers just boatloads of money.
Yeah.
And then you break down and you try to understand how the handset business works these days, and maybe you're not saving as much money, but these devices have new capabilities. One of the biggest benefits that Sprint has brought to this program is the inclusion of Band 12.
Yep.
And
At a cost to Sprint.
At a cost to Sprint, exactly. So let me just say that again. Sprint put Band 12 in their phones, and they don't have Band 12 spectrum. So if you're looking for ways to affirm the commitment of Sprint to the ecosystem, to the community, to the CCA, look no further than the inclusion of Band 12 in the handsets. That's not nothing, okay? We looked at this program 2.5 years ago and we said, hey, put Band 12 in your handsets. If you guys remember, that was the big linchpin. We went, to the mattresses on Capitol Hill, the FCC, trying to get interoperability in the 700 megahertz band because of this issue of all the 700 megahertz band 12 spectrum holders couldn't get access to devices. Well, now we have a portfolio of devices that will be inclusive, all inclusive of band 12. So take that as an example. Now you have devices that are capable of working on your network. You have, at the same time, and probably are going to save you some money. So you put those three things together, and I think you have a pretty interesting program.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to underplay the 700 megahertz addition into the
It's huge.
hands because for several years we were fighting tooth and nail as an association and as independent carriers going to the FCC, going to the Hill, looking for some type of mandate, some type of support, some type of help to be able to have 700 interoperability.
Which, by the way, we won on.
Yeah,
right? Which we did too.
And here we go. Now,
Yeah.
boom, we with a huge investment, we have handsets with that accessibility. So, I mean, that is something we
But
can't.
I think, excuse me, I think that the point that you look at other carriers who actually own 700, it's easier to see where they would be including in their handsets. In this particular instance, Sprint not owning 700 is, I agree the point about the CEO, I agree about the thing. Those are all good points. They Timo, whatever the things are that have kept them in. I'm really immersed in the program, so I know that the same cast of characters I've been working with for a year and a half hasn't changed. Those same guys show up to all the calls. We know the commitment because I'm there every day. But when you start seeing these handsets roll out with capabilities that have never been offered before, and there's not a lot of benefit for Sprint directly, that's a big deal. So I think it's part and parcel with what's going to be interesting for these operators. The portfolio is the other really critical thing because like Aaron touched on, there's historically been access to devices, but now you have access to more devices. The Iconics are good. Everybody's interested in those Iconic devices. But more so, a lot of our CCA members are interested in those mid-tier or lower-tier devices.
Yeah.
And those will be in there. And they're not just going to be some device you're not familiar with. These are going to be tested and certified and quality devices that you'll have access to, and you'll get access to them, as just part of the portfolio. You have to go around searching for them. They'll be in the hub and readily available. So the last point I want to make is one of the other key benefits is that, Aaron mentioned about the buying power. Through this program, through the generosity, and generosity is the right word, or the ability that the carrier will realize through this program is no volume commitments. So when you go through and buy your handsets, you're no longer having to worry about how many handsets you're having to buy to get the discount. The price is what the price is going to be, which is a good price, which is all negotiated, all transparent. Everybody's going to be clear on the pricing, and you can go in there and buy, your handsets. And so this program gives you the opportunity to go in there and get what you need and not feel the pressure of having to overestimate or where you're going to miss out, participate, leverage the national brand, national advertising. So, I think we're real excited, and I think the carriers, when we get together with you in a little bit later today, are going to really see some interesting things.
Yeah, a lot of people, are driven to the high end of the device spectrum. I'm driven to the low end. Most of my business is down market, and because we're a late entrant to the market, and so my particular interest is mid to down market handsets.
Right.
So,
and to that point, Terry, that's
yeah.
why, the thing we need to be clear about is when we go into this, there is additional work that goes into these handsets to make them compatible for the device hub. We are not seeing this as a unique configuration to Sprint. There is not a particular portion of our spec that we apply to only certain products, because the needs of the needs of the members that are flowing into the hub are all up and down the portfolio. So the thing that we want to be clear of is the inclusion of 700 spectrum, the bands 2, 4, 5, 10, 12 inclusion, the support for 1X to LTE hybrid mode on both SR-LTE and circuit switch fallback, the aggregation of all of our volume to CSIM as the SIM part for the product, form factor for the product. All of those things are part of our standard specifications, and they apply to our roadmap up and down the portfolio. Yes, we're starting with Android, because that's where we can aggregate that's the highest volume of SKUs, and that's where we can get our biggest bang for our buck. But the specifications specifically on hardware, they're applying to all of our products, because we don't want to make this a pick and choose type thing. When we get to the point where we can deliver this, we want to make the entirety of our roadmap available. Again, OS by OS, because they each have unique things. But starting with Android, we want to get to a point where our entire Android portfolio is available to the CCA device hub.
Well, then that leads me to my next question. That's a perfect segue, and we'll go this way up the panel. Where are we going to be then a year from today, and how are we going to get there? What's the vision for a year from today, and how are we going to get there from your perspective, from everybody's individual perspective?
So it's ambitious, but I would say based on where we're trending, specific with device hub, based on where we're trending, I don't think it's a stretch to think that a year from today, we've got this formula figured out. We're working through the onboarding of multiple additional partners beyond the initial 3, and I'm hoping that happens in calendar year, so that a year from today we're up and running and we're moving product through the hub for really anybody that's got an interest and anybody that's able to join the program.
Okay, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's the full Sprint product line available.
It's a little limited today to start off with, right? It's a select few products and then move to
because of those criteria.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. There's a transition period where, when you plan products 18 months out, there's a transition period where you have to get that compliance built in. But I would say, just in 2015 alone, this is when we're introducing the hub, and in 2015 alone, we'll have, upwards of a dozen products we'll have, which will be compatible, which is the majority of our Android lineup. It's not the entirety of it, but it is the majority of it.
Aaron, did you?
Yeah, our expectations would be that we'd be procuring devices through this, or have the opportunity to procure devices throughout the whole entire portfolio. We firmly believe that'll probably be accomplished 2015, and then a year from now, obviously, we hope that it's applied to all devices, and it's just part of business.
Okay. Right?
Well, I've been mandated to add all the operators, so my schedule says we're going to get everybody that's interested on board, and I'm tracking to have the availability for those interested, like I said, to be on board, and I think based on like Ryan said, we'll have some pretty interesting devices by the end of the year, somewhere close to 10 devices, 12 devices, and I hope to have the same amount of operators, because we want to get to a state there where we can start expanding to additional things like modules and M2M IoT, and there's a lot of other interesting things that as a community we could be working on to make available.
Okay. Steve?
Maybe it's my perspective, but the only 2 other things that I'd add to that, and certainly for when you talk about the breadth of the portfolio, I think it's really worth noting that you'll have the brands that you'd want across, top to bottom in the portfolio. I'm certain everyone in this room faces what with scale being what it is for this market, the extent that some of the bigger brands choose not to offer a complete lineup or not to participate at all is a real problem. And to get the tier 1 brands that you're looking for top to bottom, I think that's a big deal because there's a bunch of aspirational tier 3s out there that are willing to support the opportunity in this room. But to the extent that you're leveraging maybe a marketing spend or the excitement around a launch and being able to participate in that, there's incremental value there. And I think leveraging the Sprint portfolio and putting it across their portfolio at least ensures that. So I'm excited to have a higher quality portfolio going forward as it builds out. And then I think the second one is more about it's working together. And as you aggregate scale and there's things that you can do, and now we're trying to leverage the Sprint volume, it does bring in different portfolio opportunities and it does make planning a little bit more exciting. So where we're just starting the engine now and we've only got 1 or 2 devices available and that ramp's going to be steep throughout the year, bringing on other operators and moving volume over builds the program where we'll get different categories and we have the ability to make emerging devices relevant. So it's really the stepping stone to a bigger vision from a portfolio and really a user's perspective on your network. So I get excited about where that could go.
Okay, I've got 10 minutes left. I do want to, I don't know if we're set up for, do we have microphones for questions? I don't know if we're set up for, perfect, okay, we do. But I'm going to hold off real quick. I want to give Brad and maybe the 2 carriers, if you want, a chance to just briefly talk about the roaming hub. Is there anything you want to, this has been device-centric here, but that's okay. But
I think most folks, thank you. I think most folks are familiar that at the same time Mazda's speech talked about this community, we talked about our LTE roaming hub, and I just want to briefly give an update on that. Just historically, we went through a process and we went through a formal RFP and we picked a vendor, TNS, and so most folks have been seeing the work as we've been coming around. But I'm really proud to say that the team's done a great effort and we're live in the market with traffic. We continue to add carriers. We just added our first 2 international operators. We're continuing to sign folks up, and it's starting to gain some real good traction. It's still work in progress. We still have work to go, but part and parcel with the devices is the roaming, and so this is a huge initiative as well that is coming together. So I'm really proud of that team. As well for the work that we've been able to accomplish.
you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, we're excited about it. We've gone through 3 LTE roaming implementations to date. So the time to market that the hub's going to give us, that advantage of time to market to increase our LTE footprint nationwide, that's extremely exciting. Those type of implementations are not easy implementations. So having, again, the hub there to help support and make those implementations be a little bit smoother and less painful, we're excited about that.
Okay. Nate, you good?
Yeah, we're a little different. We have a wholesale agreement direct with Sprint, so it doesn't really necessarily apply to.
Okay, real good. So I assume any carrier who wants more information or wants to sign up, call Brad. See Brad. Stop him in the hallway.
Email thebrad@ccamobile.org or Brad at ccamobile.org.
Okay, open up the floor to any questions if anybody has any questions. There's a question. Ryder, is that Todd?
Just ignore that. Just ignore that guy.
Ignore that guy. Right there.
Uh-oh. Is he allowed to ask questions?
No.
Question. Hopefully it won't be a stumper, but you guys all talked a little bit about interoperability and what this program's doing for that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I think you talk about the vision of a year from now, the fact that I think you guys have formed something that looks a little bit like Cable Labs, a technology alignment that today this creates this foundation to start this alignment, and this is kind of the first product or the project. But if you start thinking about VoLTE or 5G and all these other enhancements, kind of what's the capability and the foundation to start to now leverage this interoperability across a lot of other things? And maybe this is just the first of our technology alignment, but it should be ongoing on and on.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. Thanks, Todd. So a lot of folks have seen publicly, there's been announcements from Verizon and AT&T that they're working together on VoLTE interoperability, and there's been a lot of questions around what does that really mean, and when you get into VoLTE and you start thinking about it, you may think about it as a roaming thing, but you really want to think about it just as, you know, somebody from your network calling to another network, and wonder, you know, will your HD voice work with their HD voice, because the way you set up your network, like Ryan touched on, LTE is not LTE, so your network configuration may not be interoperable with their network. And so I think that's a really great opportunity for us to get some learnings. And, you know, standards is the wrong word to use, but I think guidelines. You know, historically, like Terry knows, you know, we've worked on things like this before when text messaging didn't work between operators, and we got together and we did text messaging interoperability, so we could have messages flow between operators and MMS and short codes and all the things that made these programs work. You know, it meant carriers getting together and figuring it out. It wasn't setting standards, but it was setting guidelines. And I think that's some of the key things that this program will offer, because, you know, not to give away a lot of secrets, but, you know, we were sitting in a room with a few operators talking about deploying a couple of programs and said, well, which way are you going? Which way are you going? Well, the implications of that are pretty significant, considering we're buying Sprint handsets and Sprint's deploying the handset with certain capabilities. Well, if that's going to be something that I can leverage because I'm going to make a network decision, it probably makes sense that we do that. So there's some things that can happen, you know, when you think about things that aren't roaming related, aren't even, you know, take Wi-Fi calling as an example. It has nothing to do with roaming necessarily, but it impacts on the handset level. So I think that's what you're getting at, is the ability for these services to interoperate. And it's not interoperability, because that's too confusing with the old 700 conversation. So we started saying I'll mess it up, Steve. What was it? Networking interoperability or something like that. There's a new phrase something like that, but it's more confusing.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, we're going to have to come up with an acronym for it, but it's interoperability on the software level, services level, something like that. So we're working with folks, and we're beginning to get our arms around that, because it will be a challenge. When you start turning the dials on your LTE network and you make your settings, someone else's settings may not line up right, and the last thing we need is for your callers to have an expectation that they're going to get a service that they don't get when they're making even calls in their home network.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add, Brad, to what you said, because I agree with you. You know, we view this as a partnership, and it's not a business relationship. It's not just that, but it's a technical partnership as well. And when you're building devices to supply into a device hub that has multiple partners, you have to take their technology into account. So Sprint would never envision. I mean, we're all trying to forge our own paths as mobile network operators. But Sprint would never envision a day where we would forge our own path alone. We know we've got this hub to contend with now. We know we've got multiple partners and a growing number of partners through this year coming along. So we have to treat it as, it's almost like a technical council, right? We have to consume the requirements of all, get to a common baseline, yes, and that does not mean that we build to every single unique one-off that's out there, but get to a common baseline that meets the needs of most. And meets the baseline needs of all, and it really becomes a collaborative effort. So when Sprint decides to make the move to VoLTE and move that way, it behooves us to meet with the partners as part of the CCA device hub and make sure that we understand how that will not only impact how our devices work on their networks, how their devices work on ours, but what opportunities we're either including ourselves in or precluding ourselves in for future roaming agreements, future network sharing agreements, future device sharing agreements. It really does become something where we all need to be considerate of each other, and that's why I say we're all in it together. This becomes something that when we're pushing towards new technologies, we really need to be pushing together. And that's what I'm hoping this will enable, and I think we're already seeing that just through the technical discussions we've had so far.
Another question? Another question? Seeing none? Going once? Going twice? Don't want to leave anybody out. Let me close just by saying all of these people and all the people who are on the stage here that have been working on this deserve a tremendous amount of credit for a really, really difficult job. I know how difficult it's been So, you know, I personally thank them and am grateful for what could be coming down the road that's even better than, you know, where we're at today. And I guess just one last philosophical thought. I got in this business in 1984. You can do the math. This is the best business, best industry in the world. Y'all should thank your lucky stars you're in this business. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Please join me again thanking our panelists. I really appreciate it. I must say that one of the things we didn't talk about that the board and all the CCA members, Terry included, we wanted to create a pathway to 4G, 5G that allowed every small carrier an opportunity to survive. Because if you don't have that pathway to invest in that network, to invest in a product that, or invest in a slice of spectrum that there are no devices that work on, or that there is no partner to give you that scope and scale of a nationwide footprint, then what do you have? No one's going to buy your service if you only service 7 counties in a rural area of the United States. This is, in my opinion, is the epitome of an industry ecosystem that is generous to everyone that wants to compete. And I think Sprint should not only be thanked, but we haven't mentioned T-Mobile. T-Mobile is also considering a more generous relationship, and I think Sprint has done us all a favor by showing us the way. And thank you one and all. Thanks. We'll come back in here this afternoon at 3:15 for 2 keynote sessions, and then the floor will be open downstairs. The exhibit floor will be open downstairs. Thank you.